The theory of consequentialism is straightforward. It requires maximizing overall utility. This theory has faced criticism from many scholars, who often cite the following example to argue that consequentialism imposes extreme demands on individuals. If Tom were a consequentialist, he would be obligated to donate most of his income to aid the poor in impoverished nations in order to maximize overall utility. As a result, Tom himself would be forced to live in extreme poverty. Unfortunately, these critics are mistaken. In this example, they fail to calculate overall utility correctly. If overall utility were properly computed, we would find that Tom's donations could not possibly increase overall utility. Suppose there are two countries, country A and country T. Country A is very wealthy, while country T is extremely poor. Country T primarily exports its products to country A. To assist the poor in country T, country A donates a total of $10 million to country T. Let us examine whether this action increases or decreases overall utility. After donating $10 million, country A's national income decreases by that amount, meaning its citizens must reduce consumption by $10 million. How does this reduction in consumption affect both countries? First, in country A, reduced domestic consumption leads to decreased domestic production, which in turn results in unemployment. Second, in country T, reduced consumption in country A leads to a decline in exports from country T. Decreased exports reduce production in country T, which again leads to unemployment. This process increases the number of people living in poverty in country T, thereby requiring even more aid. Consequently, a vicious cycle emerges in which country T becomes increasingly impoverished and dependent on ever greater amounts of assistance. If country A's citizens had not donated the $10 million, but had instead spent that money domestically, country T's exports would not have declined, and its poverty would not have worsened. Moreover, if country A's citizens increased their consumption, country T's exports would rise, factories would hire more workers, and poverty in country T would actually decrease. Clearly, under these conditions, donations exacerbate poverty in country T and thereby reduce overall utility. To increase overall utility, the appropriate course of action for country A's citizens is not to donate, but to increase consumption. Once overall utility is properly calculated, it becomes clear that consequentialism does not impose extreme demands on individuals. Some may find this argument counterintuitive. Yet nearly every culture expresses a similar proverb that captures its underlying intuition. Give a man a fish, and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish, and you feed him for a lifetime.